عرفت الهوى مذ عرفت هواك عرفت الهوى مذ عرفت هواك وأغلقت قلبي على من عاداك وأغلقت قلبي على من عاداك وقمت أناجيك يا من ترى وقمت أناجيك يا من ترى خفايا.
What is tawassul? I am told that tawassul is okay if we practice with Rasulullah SAW only and not with the awliya and salihun. And why do some Tariq scholars visit graves other than the grave of Rasulullah SAW?
There's a sahih hadith. The mukharrij escapes me, but the lafz we remember. It's the dua of the Prophet, and you can reference it. One of his du'as walking to the masjid. He taught us to say, Allahumma inni as'aluka bihaqqi sa'ilina alayk, wa bihaqqi al-raghibin ilayk, wa bihaqqi man shaya hada ilayk. فإني لم أخرج أشرا ولا بطرا ولا رياء ولا سماء بل خرجت اتقاء سخطك وابتغاء مرضاتك أسألك أن تعيدني من النار وأن تدخلني الجنة وأن تغفر لي ذنوبي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. So the essence of that dua, and the point we're only going to transit at the beginning, it's asking Allah to forgive us while we're walking to the masjid. But the beginning is that the Prophet ﷺ taught us to say, I ask you by those who ask, by those who ask you, by those who desire you, which are people, right? It's a tawassul bil-dhawat, other than the Prophet ﷺ, and he taught us to do that. And by my walking to you, which is a tawassul of al-amal al-salih, he taught us that. There are examples in the seerah of the companions, like the hadith of Bukhari, where Umar radiallahu anhu did a tawassul with Abbas. That's a question. And just one legal point, that when you have a text that is unlimited, that's mutlaq in the Sharia, that is not made muqayyad, that is not limited except by another text in the Sharia. So if the Prophet ﷺ founded tawassul, like in the hadith of the blind man or other hadith, and that was nothing about that limited it to him. For someone to limit it, actually they're the one who needs evidence, not us. I will reference an article or answers and appendices of Shaykh Keller of the hadith of the blind man, where he discusses, and if you just search like Nuh Keller blind man, he'll discuss the many hadith masters that said that hadith of tawassul is sahih. That's what we worship Allah with. If others don't, there's plenty of beautiful ways they can make dua, and we're happy they're making dua. With respect to visiting graves other than that of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Muslim narrates that the Prophet ﷺ said, I passed by the grave of Musa at the Red Dunes on the night of my nightly journey, and he was standing in his grave praying. The Prophet ﷺ visited the grave of Musa, and that's in the Sahih Hadith of Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ visited the grave of his mother Amina. The Prophet ﷺ marked the grave of his brother Uthman bin Mad'un with a large stone, and said, so that I can know the grave of my brother and bury my family who dies there. And he would regularly visit al-Baqiyah, so he visited other than himself, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So certainly we can. And he said, and the hadith is sahih, Zuru al-qubura fa innaha tudhakkirukum al-akhirah. Visit graves, for that reminds you of the hereafter. So, that's clearly established. It's something upon which there's no dust. So, as we've mentioned, a lot of these questions, they stem really from a compound ignorance that has been disseminated among the Ummah. It's unfortunate. You all have an amazing tradition that I'm personally, as someone who was a student of the Shafi'i school, alhamdulillah, now it's going on like 15 years, I'm in awe of Southeast Asian scholars. Dig into your tradition, and you'll find many answers to these questions. Just one thing to add to that salawat of Prophet, you need shuyukh. Honestly, personally, I didn't feel like I really embraced it in religion, and certainly like I began to experience and understand the religion until I met shuyukh who I loved and took from. Everyone needs that, and you have access to that here more than many places relatively close to you. We know people within an hour flight at least, or even not very distant drive. And you should study online, you should study in programs like this, but you should meet people of Allah and drink from what they have, and these things, they really can become impactful. And that's what we have to say about it from Muslims.
No, I was just going to stress that point about your tradition, that you really, really have a beautiful tradition here. And that, just to reiterate everything that Shaykh AbdulKarim just said, that really come to know how Islam came to your lands here, come to know the nature of your tradition, come to know the nature of the Islamic school system that was set up, with all of the beautiful things that people brought back from the sources of knowledge, places like Azhar al-Sharif, places like Makkah al-Mukarramah, places like the Yemen, Tarim, and so forth. And that if you root yourself in that and come to know that will be an overarching solution to some of these questions that are brought up. And also, as Shaykh AbdulKarim said, is that I would really say limit how much religious knowledge you take from online scholars unless you know that are really qualified. Is that unfortunately a good percentage of people get their knowledge from Sheikh Google. That they just type something and look it up, and that there's living people that you can learn from right here in your backyard. That you don't need to go to fatwa.com or whatever else it is. Is it root yourself in that, and that while bumping up the level of proofs and knowledge, and it's the best of both worlds.
Pray 50 prayers or 35 because Sayyidina Musa kept telling me the wise and said to go back to the Lord and ask for Jesus. It would say that it's the one what you might experience. So one of that was to look at and another one you would be corrected right now is that the Prophet Muhammad told us, does he benefit from other than him? He told Sayyidina Umar there will come a man, and I can't remember his time at this time, but when he comes to you, seek him and ask him to make forgiveness for you. So, Jazakallah khair afwan.
One more less.
Sorry, we're sort of down to one mic. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Shaykh Muhtaram, just a quick one, a related question, brother, I think if that's okay with you. You mentioned the hadith muta'alliq with the blind, and some of this is sort of whispering, like, what's that hadith all about?
Yeah, that's one of the hadith of tawassul. The Prophet ﷺ, and it's Sahih. Tirmidhi and others narrated it. That a man came to the Prophet ﷺ who was blind, and he asked the Prophet, and you could read, it's in Shaykh News article, but we like to make this dua, so we're going to make it, inshallah. He came to the Prophet ﷺ, he's blind, and the Prophet ﷺ said, go make wudu and pray 2 rakas, and then make this dua. And the dua is, Allahumma inni as'aluka wa atawassalu ilayka bi nabiyyika nabiyyir rahmah. Oh Allah, I ask you, and I take as a wasila in asking your prophet, the prophet of mercy. And then he said, Ya Muhammad, inni atawassalu bika ila rabbi fi hajati hadihi, Allahumma shafi'hu fi. Oh Muhammad, I take you as I, through you, turn to my Lord in this need of mine, that it be fulfilled. O Allah, allow him to intercede. He taught him to make that dua, and then he made that dua as a blind man and re-entered the majlis, and the Sahabi narrating it said this, and he was able to see. He had regained his sight. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and when you ever have a need, make this dua. So you could search that hadith. Many hadith masters said it was sahih. And it's a beautiful dua. And that's a dua. And then some people came along and said that it's shirk to do that. And they massacred Muslims. And they made their wives concubines. And they made their property spoils of war. And we continue to be harmed by the likes of that thinking, and that's what we see taking place in the surface of the earth today. And don't take my word for it, read the history, and Allah knows best.
Okay, inshallah, one more last question before we end the session.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I try to arrange the nuggets in sensible. I hope it makes sense. My question will make sense. I'll try to arrange the nuggets based on two things. The premises is this. One is the area of knowledge or confusion, and that leads to loss of adab. And that gives, or it arises to, giving birth to false leaders. And the false leaders, not only the Amirul or the leaders that we see out there, it's actually coming back to ourselves as a Khalifa and Abd of Allah. Okay, that was one of the premises. The second one is the fulfillment of the covenant as Abd and also as Khalifatullah. Okay, so that is the premises. And then B, is actually the issue. I'll give you a scenario because we discussed so much about, to be the abd or the fulfillment of our two biggest covenant, which is being the abd of Allah as well as the Khalifa of Allah. We need that knowledge as well as we save ourselves from the first premise that I mentioned. Yeah. Okay. So I have been asked this question because for the past 8 years, alhamdulillah, as Allah, that please guide me to be the student of knowledge. In fact, the first sister who mentioned about that, being a Muslim, born in this country, I have my own dilemma as well, alhamdulillah. And for the past 2 years, I've been bombarded with questions in a good way. There are some sisters who are yearning to learn, to walk in this path of knowledge, but they have issues, they have constraints, and the clothes that fit in me may not fit my other sisters. So I can only say La Adri, I don't know when will be the time for me to ask questions. And I've been keeping this for 2 years, and for the past few months I've been getting these questions a lot. And I think, alhamdulillah, perhaps this is the time that I should, ask from all the teachers here, mashallah. So the scenario is this. It may not be applicable to all the sisters, but I'm quoting one, a lady of mid-30s. She has to work as the husband is not working, and she has just given birth to a small child recently, and she's yearning to learn about the deen because, we have to have a connection with the wisdom, the divine speech of Allah. But if Al-Fatiha, we don't even really understand what we utter. Even Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, we're not even able to embody. And how? And she always cry, and some of my friends cry, how am I going to do? How am I going to be like you? Spend some time with the shuyu and learn. And I can't answer that, subhanAllah. So the question is, because the premise, the domain of a woman is as such. I wouldn't want to dwell into that, but I'll just focus on the issue. So learning from the husband, well, we know the issues of our current Muslims, subhanAllah. So she needs to learn from other mashayikh, okay? So whether, I know, I can't because it's a premise, so it's an issue. So how would she do in that capacity, limited capacity, having to raise children of 5, have a small child, she has to go to work to earn some money, at the same time to fulfill that yearning to learn about the deen. I hope my question makes sense, and my scenario makes sense. Thank you. Jazakumullah khair.
So, metaphor.
There's no doubt there's multiple dimensions to this question. Some are easily answerable. Others, or our context of the United States, I think is even much more difficult just because of the availability of solutions. But to me, I think one really good answer is just to look at a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that states, "Man salaka tariqan yaltamisu fihi ilman sahhala Allahu lahu tariqan ila al-jannah." That whoever that sets out on a path to learn sacred knowledge, in that Allah will facilitate for him or her a path to paradise. We've heard that hadith before. What does that mean though? That two things. That one, what's required of you is just to set out on a path to knowledge. Okay? And what that means is that that's muqayyid, and that's limited by one's own experience. Okay? Whatever that might be. That some people have, restrictions that other people don't have. This is a part of life. And that Imam Malik was once asked about seeking sacred knowledge. He says it's a great thing, but look at your situation where Allah has put you. And that you might have certain things that limit, like rearing children, like providing livelihood, like taking care of your parents. You might have health restrictions. There could be a number of restrictions. Gender in some places could be a slight restriction. But the point is that look at the wisdom of our Prophet. As he said that man salaka tariqan, that he didn't say whoever studies 100 times a day or 50 times a week or like he said man salaka tariqan. And you have to remind yourself in these situations that life is a balance between what you can do outwardly as a means to seek what you want to attain. In other words, it's a sharia and haqiqah. Outwardly you're required to learn, there's no question about that. In the way that you're able to learn given your individual restrictions. You mentioned the story of this particular sister. But the beauty of it is that the whole purpose that you learn, ultimately, is for Allah. And that you have a merciful Lord. In other words, that the other dimension of this hadith is that if you just fulfill that first part which is upon you, which for this sister it might just be once a month. It might just be a class online, or it might just be something small. Is that the result of it is Allah will facilitate for him or her a path to paradise. In other words, is that you do what you can outwardly, right? And then your true reliance is not on what you do outwardly. It's upon Allah. And that from the grace and mercy of Allah is that if you do a little, that if Allah Ta'ala gives you tawfiq and there is tasheel, He facilitates and gives you divine success, that you can attain what other people can't attain without Allah. So we have to remind ourselves of the dimension of reality, that the whole reason that we're doing this ultimately is to draw near to Allah, is to enter into paradise, is to, and so forth and so on. And that will, help someone no matter what is happening in their life. And I would like to mention a couple practical things in that regard as well, is that Shaykh AbdulKarim Yahya has that online classes. I know I just criticized online learning, but that doesn't apply in this sense. Perhaps it could be sent out. I'm sure there's an email list, or I don't know how you all do it here, but he has online classes that he does regularly that I highly encourage everyone. It'll be a 12-hour time difference, so you might have to get up early, but that's part of the struggle. I would highly encourage that. Also, Seekers Hub. I don't want to put a plug in for an institution that don't take my classes, but take Imam Afroz classes and Shaykh Falah's Rabbani's and the other classes on Seekers Hub. That there's a lot of benefits that people can get from Seekers Hub and other institutions like Qibla, and that qualified people of knowledge. That this is an option, that is a band-aid, having people before you that to teach you. And I think in the long term, that one of my biggest critiques of Muslim communities worldwide is that how they don't take knowledge serious enough. If we understood the importance of knowledge, is that think about how seriously we take dunya. Think about how many years that we spend in a classroom to get a master's or a PhD for our career. Like, when are we going to, as a community, take learning seriously? And that we need a whole bunch of different initiatives. We need institutions where men and women both can study together from men and women scholars. That we also need female institutions only, where females learn from that other females. That we need options online, we need options locally. And this is the degree that just takes time to achieve. And people that naturally, this is marabut bil himma al-rijal and wanisa, that spiritual aspiration is what leads to these types of developments and so forth. And so while that's happening, though, we always have to remember the hadith of the Prophet. You're required to do what you can do, and if you do that, know with absolute certainty is that Allah will facilitate for you the whole purpose that you seek to study anyway, right? Which is to know Him and to be have proximity in the next world.
Could just briefly add to that. Firstly, we're living in a very complex and complicated world. And whilst I completely agree that in fact women are getting the wrong end of the stick in many ways, I think we do want to mention that part of the problem is not just the men per se. I think we have to be careful that this does not actually end up into a gender implied question per se, because there are also many men who are in exactly the same circumstances. In fact, statistics show for both Malaysia and Australia, which I'm very much aware of, that in fact there are more women who are more educated, and particularly in Islamic sciences, than in fact men. In Australia it's actually extremely true. Here in Malaysia it's also quite diverse as well, as far as that is concerned. The first point I wanted to make is actually that in context of what you actually have asked of the difficulties, I think the online courses are actually an alternative available to people. Although I myself, being part of Seekers Hub Global, our vision is to bring people back to the feet of teachers, because people are not actually connecting to knowledge. You have to first connect them to knowledge and bring them back in the regard. So it's a very good option there, and particularly when you actually have authenticated scholars who are teaching these classes without a doubt. And both Shaykh AbdulKarim Yahya and Shaykh Rhodus classes are an immense benefit, that if you actually learn those 12 lessons in a very embraced way, that actually you spend your time, the mujahada actually into those classes. Each one of those 12 sessions will lead you for 1 year to 2 years of revision and actually implementation of that knowledge base. That's number one. Number two, very, very important, that I think we have forgotten the value of mothers. That in fact, simply because you are not actually attaining maybe the outward knowledge, you're looking after your children is ibadah. Everything is ultimately connected to ibadah, as Shaykh Yahya has mentioned. Your qiyam al-layl is waking up for your child, right? We have to wake up and actually pray, but you actually woken up by the blessing of your child, for example, right? That doesn't mean that fathers shouldn't wake up. I mean, we should actually make fathers to wake up. Because, I don't know, we have to make some reasons for them to actually wake up during those many number of nights. I'm sure you all do that, mashallah. Awesome joke. Anyway, so we move on. I think we have to understand that, because that's the reason why, right? Because this Western world, or the secular world, has made it feel that our value is somehow we actually have these higher knowledge base, which are outward knowledge base and work, etc. Yeah. Yeah, and then you see that they're struggling. I want to have knowledge, but I have to work, etc., etc. So these paradigms are actually a critical problem as far as that is concerned. Never, ever, ever think that you as mothers are, as women are, this is the only religion, this is the only way of life that honors women. It's the only one on earth. The fact that actually you have behavior of Muslims causing problems, that's a different point. We have to work together to make sure that preservation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has imposed upon humanity, upon creation, is actually lived in Khalifatullah, is part of that equation that we have. The third point is, understand that knowledge is not only about this kind of an outward high knowledge. It's about the smallest that you get, and be consistent in this practice. Because then the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you the knowledge that is higher knowledge. Right? That ultimately it's our consistency with what we know. And the sami'na wa ata'na, we hear and we obey. And we are consistent in that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us knowledge. Truly knowledge is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we start to chase knowledge in the context of education, then whilst there is an outward reality and benefit in it, it corrupts our internal spirituality. Because we then start to think that this education is somehow going to make us intellectually cognizant of what is in fact around us. It is not the case. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it arises from mujahada, from whatever little we know, and consistently in that regard, and sending the salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. These are the bases ultimately. You know, if you speak to, you all have been exposed to our noble and great teacher, Habib Umar has plenty of times has come to Malaysia, and he is in Yemen. He hasn't gone and taken a PhD per se, but if you ask him of a complicated and sophisticated material science question, you will not get a better answer than from him. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given him the grace of knowledge because of his dedication and devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the path of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is haqiqah, this is truth. You know, many individuals who are very, you know, simplistic people per se. I mean, I'm a very simplistic person. Don't have much knowledge at all, but whatever I do never came from my own effort. I'm not sitting here to make that point in some kind of a romantic way, in some kind of a Tony Robbins motivational way, but in a manner to say that I without any boast about this, I can simply say that whatever small knowledge I got to have a consciousness of came because of some struggle and striving that we did on the simplest, not simplistic, but the simplest consistency of whatever knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places in front of us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us tawfiq, protect us from harmful knowledge, and give us beneficial knowledge.
Yahya mentioned a hadith, Man salaka tariqan yaltamisu fihi ilman, salaka Allahu aw sahhala Allahu lahu tariqan ila al-jannah. That is actually part of the muqaddimah of one of my favorite books, Risala al-Jami'ah, by a scholar named Al-Habib Ahmad bin Zayn al-Habashi. It's 30 pages. It's 30-page pamphlet essentially. He said that these are questions that are typically abridged from the books of Imam al-Ghazali. من علمها وعمل بها نرجو له من الله تعالى أن يكون من أهل العلم ظاهرا وباطنا وبالله التوفيق. He said that if someone knows what's in this book and acts on what's in this book, we hope for him, and that's a dua from a great man of God, from Allah Ta'ala, that it will be from the people of inward and outward knowledge, and tawfiq is only from Allah. A sister could find that and study that online. That was on Qibla, we used to teach it. A great friend of mine, Shaykh AbdulKarim. I know someone who learned that online from the West who was a drug addict or alcoholic. And he called me during the lesson, and he said, you know, I'm in a 12-step program, I'm an addict, what do I do? I said, I'm not a specialist in addiction. Listen to specialists, but don't transgress the Sharia, and you shouldn't talk about your sins. That's one of the things they do in those programs. I didn't know what I told him, stay in your program. He left his program. He left his program. He actually was able to leave the United States, which is one of the things you have to do. And then he was in Medina, and he met my teacher in Risala al-Jami'ah, who was from the Habaib, and he said, come and I'm going to introduce you to visit the Prophet ﷺ with me. And now he's studying in Tariq, you know, and his life, and he's told me at the end of the Risala, I'm no longer an addict. I stopped my 12-step program, and I'm no longer an addict. So, you know, you could read Risala al-Jami'ah or a similar treatise from these great men of God. One semester of dedication online. You'll find women right here in Malaysia that could teach you that. I would advise that sister to study Risala al-Jami'ah and act on it. And she'll be a person of knowledge, and Allah knows best.
Our many gratitude to Shaykh AbdulKarim, Afroz, and Shaykh Yahya Rhodus. Unfortunately, we have to end our session today. On behalf of the team, apologies for any shortcomings, and I am not worthy to be seated with scholars here, and forgive me if my adab, which is still very insignificant, so forgive me for anything that